And the digestion process. This is the process whereby the foods that were consumed, the nutrients that we got in the nutrition component, are going to get broken down so that they can enter the bloodstream and be used by the body. Now, this is going to involve both physically grinding and chemically breaking the foods down, and is going to take part in 5 phases. It's going to involve ingestion, usually through the mouth. You have to intake the food somehow. Then mechanically breaking it down. For humans and other animals with teeth, that's going to be done in the mouth by teeth. And organisms like birds that do not have teeth will use something like a gizzard, which usually has actual stones in it to break down because they miss having the hard parts like teeth. Chemical breakage, which is going to involve enzymes and digestive fluids to break down foods into the subunits, into the sugars and the amino acids and the vitamins and minerals that are necessary. Absorption, once this is broken down in the stomach or the small intestines or the large intestines, it has to make its way into the bloodstream, and that will happen through absorption. And then finally, this is not a 100% smooth process, and so there has to be a way to get rid of the wastes, and that's elimination. Now, I'd mentioned before that cellulose is very difficult to break down. Despite the fact that it is the most abundantly available source of carbohydrate, it is still very difficult for most organisms to, in fact, get any nutrition from it. But cows, sheep, camels, and other artiodactyls, or ruminants, have evolved a special digestive tract which houses a large number of microorganisms, mainly different bacteria, to aid with this digestive process. They also, the reason they're called ruminants is because they have these 4 stomachs, one of which is the rumen, and they use these 4 stomachs plus the process of cud chewing in order to more effectively and efficiently break down the cellulose. So as you see in the diagram of the cow up here, the food is going to be consumed and swallowed. It's going to go down into the first stomach, which is the rumen. Now, if you've ever seen something where bacteria began to break it down, like say you saw roadkill on the side of the road, and you see it after a few days, it gets all bloated and its little legs stick up and out. That's because microorganisms are beginning to break it down and it's filling with gases. Well, if you've ever been around a cow or a goat or one of the other ruminants, you notice that they have very distended stomachs, and that's not because they're fat, although sometimes cows are fat, but it's not because they're fat, it's because their bodies are bloated by all the gases from the bacteria helping them to break this food down in the rumen. They'll break this chemically and mechanically, so the stomach will churn and grind, and then they'll partially regurgitate it. They'll spit that food back up into their mouth so it can go through another round of digestion. It will go, oh, I'm sorry, before it regurgitates it, it goes from the rumen back to the reticulum, which is a very muscular stomach that breaks it down further, adds more enzymes, and from there they regurgitate to chew the cud. Then they swallow it a second time, and it enters the third stomach, which is the omasum, which, if you've ever seen the food tripe, it almost looks like a series of gills, very heavily rugosed. So a lot of available surface area for absorption to take place, and gets ground some more, digested more chemically, and then goes to the fourth stomach, which is the abomasum, where it will once again have a very finely villi-rich stomach where digestion can take place even more so, with lots of additional enzymes coming in, and will finally make its way into the small intestines. And they have an extremely large set of small intestines because the small intestines are where 90 or 95% of nutrient absorption takes place. So they have a long, even as long as a human small intestine is, which can be 12 or more feet long for a human, the cow will have an even longer one to provide lots more opportunity for continued digestion by enzymes and continued absorption into the bloodstream. And you can see here, this was a dissection of a fetal cow, the 1, 2, 3, 4 separate stomachs that are used by the cow. And when you watch the video of the fetal pig being dissected, you notice that it just has the one stomach, just like we have. It's not only stomachs that can be specialized, but teeth as well. So carnivores eat only meat. They're going to tend to have pretty much exclusively sharp, ripping, tearing teeth so that they can, well, rip pieces of flesh off. They generally don't do a huge amount of chewing. They just rip and swallow. Herbivores are going to rely on a lot of chewing because, as you've seen with the cows, it takes a lot of chewing and a lot of chemical and mechanical breakdown to digest leaves and grasses. So herbivores will tend to have a large set of grinding molars to just chew and chew and chew. And omnivores, since they eat both plants and animals, will generally have a mixture of these teeth. So can you tell which skull or jaw goes with which type of animal? I'll give you a second and then I'll go left to right. So if you need more time, pause it. But otherwise, the animal on the left is an omnivore that's actually a pig. The one in the middle is an herbivore, and you can see the large set of molars. I believe that one's a horse. And on the right, you have a carnivore. That one's actually a cat. No, a dog. Sorry, a domestic dog. Oh, sorry, badger. That one's a badger. And so some organisms rely on heavily specialized or adapted teeth in order to be able to chew the foods that they're specialized to capture, but birds don't have any teeth. And similarly, since birds came from dinosaurs, there were a large number of dinosaurs that didn't have any teeth and almost certainly relied on this very same mechanism for chewing and digesting their foods. So since they don't have a teeth, they don't have teeth, they need some other way of mechanically breaking down their food. And what they do is they have a couple of accessory organs that are going to help the stomach and the small intestines to digest the food. One of them is the crop. You can see it down below the esophagus is the first big sac there. And this is an organ that can expand, sort of like the urinary bladder can expand, and fill with water, and it will soften the food, like putting a slice of bread in water and watching it bloat up and get really soft. Essentially, that's what happens in the crop. They'll let the corn or whatever it was that they ate soften a little bit. They'll begin with the glandular stomach to add some enzymes to break it down a little bit chemically, and then the food will go to the gizzard, which if you've ever seen chicken gizzards for sale in a grocery store, they're really hard. I mean, very, very heavily muscled. Um, and they will tend to swallow little pebbles, and the pebbles will get lodged in the gizzard, and so they'll use these very strong gizzard muscles along with the pebbles that are stored in the gizzard to grind the food as though they were chewing it. Since they don't have teeth, they use this strong stomach muscle or strong gizzard muscle and the rocks to break it down in place. And then they'll, same way as mammals, the food will pass from the crop to the stomach to the gizzard and then into the small intestine where most of the digestion and absorption will take place. And then for birds and reptiles, and well, birds and other reptiles, they'll use a cloaca, which is sort of the one part does it all excretory organ. So this is the, other than the mouth, this is the only other in-out part. So the cloaca will be used for excretion, for where they will, where their anus is. They will use it for urination, and they will also use it for reproduction. So one-stop shop sort of thing. All right, and I'll give you some time to answer these, and really just when you look at these in the slides, make sure you wait until you've answered them to advance. You can pause this if you need more time. Now, human digestion, we're obviously highly interested in that because, well, hey, it's us. Digestion is going to begin in the mouth. We're going to chew our food, but even while we're chewing it, you will begin to chemically digest it as well. So we have 4 basic types of teeth. We have incisors, which you can see is sort of the goldenrod and orange. These are your front teeth, the ones that kids tend to lose first. Then you get the canine or the cuspid tooth, which is the kind of pointy tooth. It'll be the 3rd tooth from the middle. Then we get premolars, which are smaller versions of grinding teeth. And those are the only teeth that young children up until about age 8 or so will get. And then they begin to get their molars, which are the 3 teeth that are the largest and used the most dominantly for grinding in humans. And we have 2 molars that generally erupt in the general population, and a 3rd molar that many people don't have erupt, and this is called the wisdom tooth. So as we're chewing and chewing, we begin to salivate. We have saliva, which is going to be, that kind of mucousy substance that's going to mix with the food and help facilitate swallowing. But mixed in with the saliva are also some enzymes. So if you notice in the picture, we have 4 different sets of glands. We get the parotid gland and the accessory parotid gland. We have the sublingual gland, or the gland under the tongue, and the submandibular gland, which is, well, sub means below the jaw, but obviously it's not actually below the jaw. It's kind of alongside the jaw. And these glands will start to secrete enzymes that will aid with digestion, especially of starches in the mouth. And so if you ever chew on a cracker or a piece of bread for a long time, you'll notice that its taste sort of changes, and that's because you're beginning to digest. And bacteria are also going to be heavily involved in the mouth. They kill some of the, part of the enzymes are bacteria killing enzymes, but our mouth also has bacteria that help us. Our mouth actually has more bacteria than most dog mouths, but obviously it doesn't bother us because we're adapted to have them there. Taste. It seems like, taste would be important, or it doesn't seem like taste would be very important, but it really is. We can taste 5 basic tastes: the bitter, salty, sweet, sour, and umami, or savory. And this doesn't work the way you might have learned when you were younger, if you're sort of my age, a little on the mature side, shall we say. You don't have separate regions, but you have separate taste buds, or the little sensory papillae on the tongue that are specialized to taste one particular flavor. But those papillae are spread all throughout the tongue, so you can taste bitter and sweet and salty and sour anywhere on the tongue, but the front, the back, and the 2 sides of the tongues have a deeper concentration of these papillary or sensory papillae, and so we taste more with the front and less with the middle of the tongue, just because of the number of taste receptors. Now, obviously, we enjoy food and we'll enjoy the taste, but it's important for recognizing food quality as well. If you're blind, or if you just close your eyes and you put something in your mouth, you can often tell if, ooh, that's bad, I shouldn't eat that. One embarrassing thing that had happened to me, I have a bad habit of not turning the lights on. I'd gone to the kitchen to get some breakfast, and I was running late, so I just grabbed a bagel and slapped some butter on it and ran to the car and, had it in a paper towel, and I never even looked at it. Well, I got into the car, It was winter, so it was dark, so I still didn't see it because the lights weren't, on in the car. And I took a bite and I immediately spat it out. I didn't need to see it. And if you have ever had moldy bread, you know what I'm talking about. That taste immediately tells you this is not healthy, get rid of it. Interesting but disturbing also, that's where pepper and a lot of the spices that we use came in. Things like garlic and onion, although I obviously don't eat them, um, are good because they kill bacteria. Black pepper had actually begun to be used a lot in the 15 and 1600s because it's so strong and it almost tastes a little rotten itself. It would hide or mask the flavor of meat that was beginning to go bad. And so it was used to expand the number of days that you could serve foods. So again, interesting but a little disturbing. Hopefully you don't use black pepper that way. After the mouth, the tongue is a muscle that's obviously going to help move the food around so that you can both chew it more efficiently and have the enzymes get to a greater portion of the surface area of it. But it's also the muscle that's going to help the swallowing process. And the tongue is going to help move the food into the pharynx, which is the back part of the mouth, and into the esophagus, which is that muscular tube that connects to the stomach. The epiglottis, which is that little flap deal that you see in the back of your throat, should close when you begin to swallow, and that closes off the entrance to the trachea, so that when you swallow, your food goes down the esophagus and not down the trachea, because if it goes down the trachea, then you choke. And a series of muscle contractions, or peristalsis, will help move the food down the esophagus and into the stomach, and generally this just takes a few seconds. It will take a long time to digest the food in the stomach, but the journey to the stomach is very rapid. And if you have this in the slideshow mode, you can click the link to video of peristalsis. Otherwise, if you hold your mouse on it and hold or click Control K if you're a PC user, or Command K if you're a Mac user, it'll bring up the URL so that you can go and watch the video. And it's a pretty cool video that shows an x-ray of food getting swallowed, so it's pretty cool. Food will then get to the stomach, and there are two sphincters. Sphincters are very strong muscles that are going to contract to hold food in the stomach so that neither food nor the enzymes responsible for breaking it down and the acids responsible for breaking it down leave the stomach. So you have the cardiac sphincter on top, closer to the heart, and you have the pyloric sphincter at the base of the stomach just before the small intestines, and the first portion of the small intestine is called the duodenum, so you might see that there in the image. The pyloric sphincter is much stronger, so if you're doing an actual dissection or when you're watching the video, either the video or the stills of the fetal pig dissection, you can actually see that sphincter. The muscle is so strong that it distends the base of the stomach a little bit. The cardiac sphincter is much smaller, not as muscular, and you tend not to see it. And you might be able to figure out why that is. I mean, how often does food accidentally go too early into your small intestine? And you probably realize not too often, because if it did, the acids in the stomach, if it were getting out too soon, would burn your small intestines and you'd have serious problems. But does food ever leave your stomach and, go back up the esophagus? And, well, unfortunately, it obviously does quite a bit anytime that you vomit, right? Reverse peristalsis, when the muscles go upwards instead of downwards. And if you suffer from heartburn, what's happening there is that some of the acids from within the stomach are being released back up into the esophagus because the cardiac sphincter opens up a little bit before it should and releases those acids, and it burns and hurts. So that's what heartburn is. It doesn't actually relate to a heart condition, rather a stomach condition, but it certainly hurts in the heart area. And there are three functions of the stomach. One is that it's going to store the food because it takes a number of hours to break down, so it has to hold in there. And if you notice, both in the picture that I showed with the cow stomachs and in the video and images of the pig stomach, that there are a lot of folds and ridges, and it can expand a lot. And you've probably, had a big meal and needed to loosen your belt or something. It will distend, because of course, you didn't just gain all that weight. Your stomach will go back down after the stomach empties. But there are folds in the stomach to allow it to expand, because it would be very bad if it were to rupture. It's going to mechanically break down foods. Your stomach is, in fact, a muscle, and it will squeeze and contract and expand to physically massage and break down the food that's in there and the chyme that forms, and chemically as well. So there are gastric glands that are going to secrete various acids, plus mucus, plus enzymes that are also going to help break down. Pepsinogen is an inactive form that is used to break down amino acids, but of course, what are you doing if you're breaking proteins down into amino acids? You're taking things like muscle and breaking them down. So it's important that this only happen when you have the mucus lining that's going to form around it when you start to salivate, your mouth starts to get ready to eat, your stomach also starts to get ready to eat, and your stomach grumbles, and the reason it's grumbling is it's beginning to release those acids and release the mucus to line the stomach wall so that your body doesn't digest itself, because the pepsinogen and the hydrochloric acid that will break your food down could also break down the lining of your stomach. And of course, if you get an ulcer, a stomach ulcer, that's part of what has happened. So all three of those are going to take place, and then the food is going to move from the stomach after 3 to 6 hours, kind of depending on what you ate. The food is now partially digested, called chyme. It's going to move about a tablespoon at a time into the small intestines. Just like the esophagus had that peristaltic wave, the small intestines are also muscular and going to have peristaltic waves move the food through. But, if you're going teaspoon by teaspoon and you just ate the equivalent of 3 cups of food, what is it, 24 teaspoons to a cup? That's a lot of teaspoons to take. And you're only going to move 1 teaspoonful at a time, which is why it's going to take a number of hours for a meal to digest. The only difference is alcohol and drugs. This is legal and illegal drugs. They go and get absorbed into the bloodstream straight through the stomach. So this is why if you ever, and I'm sure you would never do so, but if you were to drink on an empty stomach, you don't have any food, so you don't have other absorption of minerals and nutrients taking place, and all you have is alcohol. It goes directly into your bloodstream with nothing to filter it, nothing to slow it down, and so you get drunk very fast. And then from the stomach, the chyme now moves into the small intestines. Now they're small because they're small diameter, they're actually very long, 10 to 20 feet, but only about a 1-inch diameter. They're going to finish all the carbohydrate digestion. So you had digestion of carbohydrates beginning in the mouth, continuing in the stomach, and now being completed in the small intestine. You have digestion of protein continuing. It had begun in the stomach and will continue in the small intestines. And all fat digestion. Neither your mouth nor your stomach digest fats. All of that takes place in the small intestines, with enzymes and secretions from the liver and the pancreas and the small intestines itself. So lots of help facilitating digestion and absorption of nutrients from the small intestines. And as you can see in the image, there are a series of little villi, these little bumps, and each bump has a series of microvilli. So if you were to expand out the small intestine, but then pull out all of these microvilli, you would have hundreds of feet, very, very large amount of surface area by having these villi and the microvilli, to increase the amount of absorption that can take place. And there is an external membrane with enzymes to increase the digestion even further. Excuse me. And like with the stomach, there's a mucus lining to prevent the enzymes and acids within the small intestines from breaking down the small intestines themselves. And like you probably had learned in Bio 101, anything that ends in ACE is an enzyme. And so the peptidases break down amino acids. Disaccharide break down disaccharides, and monosaccharide like lactase, will break down disaccharides and monosaccharides. Oops. So the liver and gallbladder. The gallbladder is that little green spot associated with the liver. It is its own separate organ, but it's physically attached to the base of the right lobe of the liver. The liver is going to store fats and carbohydrates. It's going to help regulate blood sugar. It's going to help make blood proteins, store iron. I mean, it's exceedingly useful. Converts ammonia to urea. Ammonia is toxic, as is urea, but urea is what we're able to excrete. And it's going to aid in digestion by producing bile. Bile is what allows the small intestines to break down fats. And bile is going to be stored in a very concentrated form in the gallbladder. So if you ever have your gallbladder removed, you generally have to cut down the fat intake because it's much harder for you to digest it because your liver can't store any of it. The pancreas has two different types of cells. The pancreas is this kind of blobby, pink, tongue-like organ that lies underneath the small intestines. One is that it produces hormones for blood sugar regulation. You know that it's going to produce and regulate insulin. And it's also going to produce digestive secretions called pancreatic juice, which is going to help with everything. It's going to have amylases to help digest carbohydrate, lipases to help digest lipids, and proteases to help digest proteins and peptides. So pretty much if your pancreas isn't working well, you have a very hard time with digestion. Cancer of the pancreas is one of the most lethal forms of cancer because, again, the pancreas is so important in digestion. And the transport of the nutrients from the small intestines. And here again, you see another view of the wall, the internal wall of the small intestine lined with the villi, which are then lined with microvilli. You can see the bile duct coming in. This is where the bile from the liver or from the gallbladder is going to come in. And so we have so sorry, I hit the wrong button, so you got the first sneeze in there. Sorry about that. But you see the villi and the microvilli. You have a set of unsynchronized contractions of muscles in the small intestine. So these aren't all working at the same time. You have various bits moving at different times, and what that does essentially is massages that chyme to allow for the greatest maximum potential of enzymes getting to, acids getting to, and contact with the microvilli coming in with each portion of this little chyme so that it's going to maximize the ability to digest it and to absorb nutrients. Water, sugars, amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, all of this are going to be carried off through the lymph capillary. The lymph, remember, is the tubes that mirror the blood vessels and run all throughout the body. So whether they go into the lymph or into the bloodstream itself right away, and most are going to go into lymph, but some are going to go into the blood, they're going to do this right directly at the lining of the small intestine. And then glycerol and fatty acids from lipase attacks on fats, they cannot go through the microvilli by themselves. So they're assembled into essentially these bits of triglyceride protein and cholesterol, and are taken through the lymphatic system. So smaller things can move through the blood system, but larger particles cannot do so, and they go into the lymphatic system, which empties by the heart and has a transfer from lymph to blood. And any of the larger molecules that couldn't go directly through the capillaries into the bloodstream from the small intestine will go through the lymph up to the top of your body and then into the blood there. Oops. Then from the small intestine, it goes to the large intestine. Now again, large intestine is named so because it has a wide diameter. It's 3 times as wide in a human, but it's only 3 feet long. And unlike the intestine, the large intestine that you saw in the pig, or will see in the pig in the video, they have a spiral colon. We have a straight colon, and it's separated into 4 portions. 3 of them are the colon, the ascending colon, the transverse colon, which goes across the body under the stomach, the descending colon, then a very small sigmoid colon, which is going to attach the absorptive parts of the colon to the rectum, which then attaches to the anus. And the rectum does not have any absorptive capabilities. It is just used to store feces until they can be excreted. So anything that your body could not digest, pieces of cellulose, we don't have the structures necessary to break them down. Small amounts of proteins and fat, sometimes we just can't break them down and they come through. What should never come through, though, are sugars. And if sugars are coming out, then this is a problem and you need to get checked. A lot of bacteria live in the large intestines. They help to make B12, as well as thiamine, riboflavin, and vitamin K. The cells that are lining the large intestine absorb these vitamins and any remaining water and salts. So if they had missed being absorbed, or water and salts had gone through and were not absorbed in the small intestine, they will get absorbed in the large intestine, unless it's not functioning properly. And I'm sure that you have at some point had extremely watery feces, and that is when the bacteria in your large intestine or some other illness is stopping them from absorbing all of the water that they should, and so it comes out rather than getting reabsorbed. And then finally, you will form hopefully solid feces and void them. And it's here too because we have bacteria in the large intestines. If you remember back to when I talked about cows, I mean, cows have a lot of bacteria that are going to help them digest the cellulose. This is a good thing, but it's a gassy thing. And so if there are things that are having a difficult time getting broken down and your body is relying on the bacteria in your large intestine to break them down, things like beans, things like if you are lactose intolerant and you consume milk, it's going to begin to get broken down by the bacteria in the stomach rather than by enzymes in the small intestines, and so there'll be gas production, discomfort, and gas release. And good to understand that with the large intestines. So all of this should stay under control. The nervous system is going to be responsible for that. So when you first smell food or you take a bite of food, your nervous system is going to start to kick in with this digestive readiness, right? You come into the house and you smell something wonderful cooking. Your mouth is going to begin to water. Your stomach is going to start to secrete pre-acids to get ready for the food to enter and have acid production occurring. Your stomach's going to start secreting mucus to protect itself from the acids that are going to be coming. And your esophagus is not generally going through peristalsis, but the entry of food into your mouth is going to stimulate peristalsis. So if you just all of a sudden take something and try to swallow, sometimes you can't do it. You have to wait a little bit. Essentially, your body has to be ready to swallow because it's an involuntary action. You can't say, okay, swallow now, and make your esophagus move. You can make your tongue move, but you can't make the esophagus start going, and so you need that readiness. And then hormones are going to regulate digestion. They're going to indicate, okay, pancreas start releasing pancreatic juices, liver start releasing bile. They're going to signal to your brain when you're full. And that's the negative feedback. And it should start to tell you, I'm full, I need to stop eating. And eventually it will then tell the mouth to stop salivating. It will tell each system in turn to stop secreting the necessary enzymes for digestion because digestion has finished. So, hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you have any questions.